Hi, I'm Dave Genz with Clam Pro Tackle. We often get asked, what's new, what's hot? Well, at Clam Pro Tackle, we introduced a new jig trailer called the Silky. It does amazing things in the water to catch fish. We got John and Jim Shabak here, Jim the inventor, and John has exclusively fished with this bait for the last 4 years. And we're here to share the tips and tricks that we've learned to help you catch more fish. Jim has invented this lure, so why did you pick silk, Jim?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, I was trying to find the most active type of thin thread that in very little movement you could get a lot of action. And because previously I was looking at plastics and I thought it needed to get more delicate, and so then I thought of what are the things I could use, and one of the things I thought of was silk because of it originates from a worm and it's a protein, and also it was fit what I wanted to do perfectly because it was it's a very fine filament, and so then that's how I started trying to find a way to incorporate that into a lure. And that's step one right there. That's level one where we got to that one, and then we had to start refining how to put it on something, put it on your hook, and then.
Well, I remember the first time you brought it to me and gave it to me, and I went, wow, I can catch fish on that.
Yeah.
And then John's got a hold of it since then, and he's come up with all kinds of different ways and to rig it on a hook to help you catch more fish.
Yeah, I'd like to also point out in the past I've given some stuff to Dave, and he goes, it won't work. So then, when I gave him this one, when he said, this will work, I kind of got a good laugh out of that, but I knew it was going to work because I could tell the way it looked in the water. So yeah, that was great.
Well, John, what are some of the ways we can rig these things?
Well, you and I started, it's 4 years ago,
4 years ago.
We started using this in the ice, and it was so much fun because we'd keep walking over to each other and say, look at this, and Dave would have something in the water and I'd go, wow, look at the way that looks. And so we started right away understanding that it's just not putting on a hook like a tied on tail or something like that. It's something that you move around, you shape, and you make it look like something the fish want to eat. And Dave, you've always said it's matching the hatch. This is what we're aiming for with this lure. So it's something when you put it on, maybe it'll work right out of the box, but we want to show how you can do all kinds of different looks with this. So I'll give you an example. Here's the famous drop kick, and we're going to put one of the Silkies on. This is a light pink Silky, and as you know, you probably have already heard, there's just a lot of different ways to put that Silky on, and we'll use the wacky rig method, which is a way of describing it like you would baits, where you go crossways, and I'm going to come through the bead. The bead is of a silicone that is exactly the right tension so that wherever you put it on the hook it stays, yet it's not so hard that if a fish bites it, that it keeps it from embedding in the jaw, so it slides. That's a perfect combination for a movable bait. So I've got it as a wacky rig, and I'm showing how it's up by the head. But it could also be at the bend of the hook or up actually almost covering the barb. All these are different looks, but this is one that I watched Dave do, is he simply rotated it up and down, and suddenly it's a different looking bait. And again, that can be moved to all the different positions. See that? Now we have it set at what we consider a size that'll work for open water or ice. So what if you need this to be a little longer? The tension in the bead is such where you can just pull that through, and then you can make your bait longer. Or you can get a scissors out and you can trim it. And all of these different moves make it look different and have a slightly different action to the fish. So I'm going to go back to where I started. This is probably a nice starting point. Wacky rigged, horizontal, moving it up, vertical. And that's what you do, Dave. You remember we spent time looking at when the fish would lose interest. You might have a couple biters in there and they would take it and then suddenly they'd stop. So instead of bringing out another rod, we'd go, wait a minute, I can make this look different. And we started experimenting with all kinds of in-the-moment adjustments.
Yeah, or put on another, there was another thing that we did to have two of them on there. And
Yep, so I'll show you how we did it with two. So now, in color contrast or shaded contrast are things you might be aiming for. Doesn't mean you can't put the same color on, but when you have a two-tone, I think it adds some natural contrast that might be typical of something you might eat. So on this one, I'm going to go and show how we might put it on, not wacky rigged, but a term that's been used by some guys is threaded. So I'm going to go along the axis of the threads.
And them little beads on the hook actually look like the body of a bug.
Yes.
So you're almost like tying a fly right out there in the boat or on the ice. You can create things out there and outfish your buddy.
And the way the bead is set up, prominent up there, what I like to do is move it up toward the point, the target for the fish, to see the bead as part of the bait. So the filaments that move individually or move in wave motion together along with the bead really makes a target.
You know, something we didn't talk about is that it needs to be in the water for a period of time for the silk to absorb water. And the more water it absorbs, the better the action looks, the more pliable it gets. It's quite amazing. So when you first put it on, it is like rigging a plastic worm, but after it's on there a while, it takes its own look.
And so we learned right away, even though targeting panfish was what we were after, we really thought this was going to be a crappie lure and a sunfish lure, of course perch too. But guess what? Northerns, bass, everything was eating it.
Got everything on them.
And you see what I just did here on this, what we call stacking it. I have this wacky rig up on top that's lighter. The darker reddish one is pulled through long. And this would create some sort of bug-looking thing. So if we put this in the water here, it's going to take a little bit. Dave, I'm going to let you see what you can do with that a little bit.
Oh, there we go.
And it takes a little while for this stuff to absorb moisture to get its true action.
You see now it kind of just fastened together, but it's starting to come apart now.
See, it's waving, loosening up. They're each individual filaments getting its own action, and you can see how little motion it takes.
You know, I'm trying to hold it steady now, and it's still moving.
And another thing that takes place, what surprised me in the beginning, is the threads actually separate instead of go together. Right. And it's pretty eye-opening when you first see it happen, and then every time you look at it, you go through the same thought process. This thing here has got.
And you can see we just created this right now. This wasn't something that was made in a factory. It was made right here just before we put it in the tank.
And you could see how this could target a larger fish, a large bass or a walleye, as well as a crappie or a sunfish. And
the surprising thing is you can catch about a 2.5-inch perch will eat that thing up too.
Yeah.
You know, they think that's food for sure.
One of the things that when we got onto it being an imitation for a bug, is that sometimes the sunfish would come up or crappie and they'd bite and you'd feel that thunk. But a lot of times you felt nothing. You actually had to lift it because they're flaring their gills and sucking it in just like they would be eating a bug. And when you get the reaction from the fish, it tipping you off to what they think it is, then you can simply go with that and begin to modify it more to be bug-like versus, say, you're looking at a little flat or a little small sunfish or something. You want it to be fish like, or crayfish, or whatever imitation you're after. But you can see, now that would be what I'd call a larger profile for that little drop kick. And I have in my hand here a scissors, and I'll just give a quick little simple way of showing how we could quickly do that. You saw that I had pulled this back thread through to make it longer. I'm going to bring it back to a middle position. If I can do that with the scissors in my hand.
So
And
what
now,
we found was when they weren't quite biting as well, and John's the one who started cutting it back. He cut a little bit, and it finally hit
Yep.
the perfect number, and that's when they start biting. It was pretty hilarious to, then we'd kind of see where he cut it and match it up, and then they would bite it. So it's real subtle. A little bit of change can make it work.
so I've pinched the threads together. What I'm trying to do is just make it a little shorter, because sometimes that's all it takes to get the fish to begin to trigger. It just isn't quite the right size. So I'm just going to trim this off, and I'm giving it a little of an angle, so I'm actually tapering it a little bit. Now let's see what that looks like. So that's a smaller bait. It's a smaller looking something to eat that it just took a second to do.
Something else I'm doing here is
Yeah.
I'm sliding the knot around the drop kick so that it hangs more horizontal. So all I did was I slid the knot around the eye of the jig, and now you'll see it hangs more vertical in the water, or horizontal in the water.
The fun part about this bait is it gives you extra tools to figure out what the fish want. And you don't have to retie another jig. You can just play around. And what we also saw is when a pod came through, some of the biters would take it in one fashion, but if you made a quick adjustment, and normally that would be making it longer or shorter, you could shorten it up and pick up a couple more fish out of that pod before they moved on. And again, because you can drop it right back down, that's the beauty of this artificial, is you just throw it right back down there once you catch it.
And that's why I like this. I've caught at least 50 fish on this one in the last few days, and it still looks good in the water. You know, until the northern comes and eats it, which northerns happen to be our best customers. It stays on your line, and so it still looks good after that many fish. So very durable.
That was one of the points that was a real surprise to just to see how durable that was and how many fish we caught. It was kind of laughable, but we just kept putting it back in there. And we didn't even stop to even do, when they're biting, you're just throwing that thing back in there so fast, and who knows how much it got twisted around or whatever. If there's some type of action that takes place that triggers them.
Seems like the more fish you catch on it, the better it looks.
I know. It seems that way, yeah, it does.
I'm going to show one other thing that I think compliments to Clam for getting so well done, is you see I put the beads up here on the tip close to the barb. More of a target for the fish if that's what they were targeting. But if we set this into the jaw, those beads will slide all the way down to the jig head. And as you take it back up, you just move it back to there just like you're adjusting the knot. So you got knot adjustment and bead adjustment, and you can do that again and again and again, and the tension on that bead is such that it doesn't get sloppy. It stays right in place. And I think that's a real key to making this so versatile and so durable.
Yeah, Clam did a great job on that. That's the part we were working with early, trying to figure out how to make this work. We started off, I came up with a clumsy type of bigger thing just to get the threads through, and then I'm not that great a fisherman, and I had it down in the U, and I was missing fish because it was there. And once we went to that smaller, we did a lot
The
of
bead,
work. Dave,
yeah.
John and I, we researched a lot of this stuff. We went back, and I would send back new things and say, okay, now does this work? How does this? How many threads should there be? We went overboard, and we went underboard, and we just kept fine-tuning until we found that
Jim is making these.
I was making prototypes.
He's making prototypes in Nevada, in California and mailing them to me, and I'm taking pictures and telling the stories of what Dave and I are figuring out, and then he's sending out prototypes and we're taking them out on the ice and giving him feedback. And Dave, his words would be, it works. And once we got that, then we could move to the next step.
Yeah, a lot of it is when you're testing, you think, well, was it just golden hour? Why are we catching these fish? You know,
Right.
Are we overthinking this thing that it's too good? Because I'm always thinking, I wonder if, because there's days when they don't bite, fish
Right.
don't bite, but we just kept proving it again and again, any different times of day, and, it turned out real.
Dave, maybe talk a little bit how this isn't exclusively the only bait you'd put on, how you can play it with fish.
Yeah, you can use this with plastics, or with the Euro larva, which I like to use, the colored spikes. You'd have them right on there with it. So it's not only just the Silky. If you're a big plastics user, it doesn't hurt to put a Silky on also and kind of enhance the way the plastic looks. And it's just amazing all the fish that we've caught on that over the last years. And try it out, and I'm sure with the tips and tricks that we've just showed you here, you will catch more fish.
But then we found that different jigs, like vertical, there's some days where vertical jig with this will just outfish horizontal. There's just, you just can't change it. I mean, they want it looking, hanging down, and so now you have to come up with a different look. Not all the things you can do with a drop kick horizontal can you do with the half hand. And the one thing, when I know the lake, I can't say the name, but I'm over there, Dave calls me over, and I look down, I have never really fished a half hand, and he's showing me his half hand with one of these on, and I said, Dave, you're making the jig back up. It literally was acting as a paddle, and as he jigged it, the half ant was going backwards, and I said, that's gonna really catch fish, and it did. That was one of those aha moments where you saw that the threads itself, the Silky itself, changed the motion of the jig because of the drag and the propulsion that the threads give to it. And once you adjust it and understand that, you can create a look that the fish really haven't seen before.
Well, this stuff looks alive, versus a little small lure, but the way those things flutter and make a S shape in the water, I think the fish see that and say, I'm meat, that's food, right?
And also when we hook the Euro larva and puncture that scent sac, that the silk absorbs that flavor out of it. So you've got to, even though the bait's getting old, the flavor hung on into the silk. And they really have a hard time getting the live bait off the hook because the silk kind of holds it all in place. So it's worked with everything that we've tried. And
I'm almost thinking that, you used to get these little biters with those threads. They can't. It seems like they have to bite it a little more or something. They can't bite the Euro larva off like sometimes their smart ones can do. Is just take it right off your thing. I think it's a lot harder to do with.
And it looks like it's swimming in the water and it's escaping. It's getting away.
Yeah, that's right. Such a subtle movement means so much more in this than any other one. Like one little move and you see like a little explosion of action there. And I think that.
I have an aha moment. An aha moment that I remember was we were seeing with the initial ones that after a bunch of fish ate them and chewed on them, they would kind of braid together. They almost looked like they were knotted together.
Yeah, tangled.
And we're saying, oh, is this a problem? And Dave's going, no, I'm catching more fish when they braid together. There's something about the threads mixing together, even if it looks like it's a bit of a knot, that must to the fish look like something alive. So you mentioned you caught a bunch of fish on that, and it actually looks pretty good the way it's there, but we can see them get knotted together, and you'd think, oh, I gotta straighten that out. No, you throw it right back down, and it's amazing how well it works.
And sometimes it untangles itself.
It sometimes untangles itself.
So if they're biting, you don't do anything but throw it back. It's
Yeah.
you as fast as you can take your fish off. You
Yeah.
practice how fast you can take the other fish off, and you don't even think of anything. You just throw it in there, boom, boom.
Oh, and so this has been so much fun over these last years when we've gotten into them, where these fish are just insane. You see them coming up for it because it looks like a bug, and you just keep throwing them in and catching them. We've had just some marvelous fishing experiences. For me, it's amazing. I'm sure Dave's got a record book of those, but boy, we've had some fantastic days with these. Well, you know, Dave, when we were out experimenting with this and trying different things, we kept coming back and forth to each other and kind of giving that aha moment. Look at this, or this works. And we came up with a lot of different options for this. In fact, we think of it as being almost countless. But once this is in the hands of all the really skilled anglers, both for open water and on ice, we're not even touching the surface, I think, of all the different applications that this thing can do to help catch fish. And I think that's the fun part about it, because everybody's going to be inventing their own special lure, their secret ingredient that's going to help them catch more than their buddies. And I think that's part of the fun.
Yeah, and there's not many lures that come out that you can actually alter and play with out on the lake and create your own things.
Yep.
You know, I said you become a fly maker or a jig maker right out there in your boat or on the ice.
And there's a lot of fun in you having the secret ingredient when your buddies next to you are struggling a little bit.
What are you catching them on over there?
Fun.
Well, we've showed you a lot of tips and tricks on how to use the Silky, but I'd really like to thank Jim for inventing this thing, figuring it out, and John for spending, 4 years of his life fishing with nothing but the Silky. But with the things we showed you here today, we know that if you go to your local sporting goods store and look for a Silky, or maybe your bait and tackle store even will have a good supply of them, you will definitely put more fish on the end of your line.